Girl About Library, and I'm here today with my February reading wrap-up. It has been a whirlwind of reading and also listening. I combined the two this month a lot, and I ended up listening or reading to 9 different books. I'm gonna go through all of the books in the order of like most loved, this book is amazing, to like, I didn't have anything that I gave less than 3 stars this month. So overall it was a really good reading month, but there were some things that they could have been better. They could have done better. First up is The Good Daughter by Karin Slaughter. This book was a roller coaster ride of amazing. I have a 60-second book review for it that I will link above and below, but basically this is a suspenseful thriller that is kind of like part law procedural and then part family drama. But it is very much one of those books where you do not want to tell the person who you are talking to like what it is about. I would say even who the main character is a spoiler, because you don't know, and you don't want to know going in. I had no idea what this book was about when I first started it. I'd heard good things about Karin Slaughter, and other than that, but I flew through this read. This is one that I combined reading and listening with, and that worked really, really well for me. I spend a good amount of time in the car every day, and so to be able to listen to a book that I'm reading and go and like switch between the two, I was able to fly through this book isn't huge, but it's around 400 plus pages, so I think it only took me like 3 or 4 days to get through it, and it was good. If you enjoy suspenseful thrillers with a touch of emotion in them, I really was connected to these characters, and I could see how someone could be even more connected than I was even. Like, it really draws you into a couple of the particular characters in the story, and it's more than just a suspense novel because of that. So if you're looking for a suspense novel with some heart, The Good Daughter by Karin Slaughter, it was good. Next up is Rebecca by DAPHNE du Maurier, and I buddy read this with Kristen's Library and Sparky Loves Books. It was my first buddy read, and it's the best way to read. Like, really, it was amazing. And this is the perfect book to buddy read as well, because I think on my own, I wouldn't have enjoyed it as much as I did because I was reading with them. I think I would have given it the same number of stars, but it was just, there are so many moments in this book that are funny, not like ha-ha funny, but like, oh my god, funny. And it was so fun to be able to share that with someone else. I was excited to read Rebecca because there has been some serious hype on BookTube for it, and I started off reading this book not getting that at all. Like, I think I was like 40 pages in or so, and I was just, I didn't get it. I didn't understand. But now I do. I get it. I totally get it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and I really enjoyed this read. There were so many good quotes from this book, and I wasn't really expecting that, but the writing is really, really strong, and I think that that's what gave it 4, almost 5 stars for me, were all of the like quotes and takeaway moments that I have from the book. This book follows a woman who we only know as Mrs. De Winter. She starts off in the book kind of being like an old lady assistant, and as she continues as an old lady assistant, she meets a man named Mr. De Winter. Mr. De Winter's wife recently passed away, and in a much of a whirlwind as possible, she becomes Mrs. De Winter. He takes her back to his fancy mansion known as Manderley, and they live their lives there. But something's not quite right at Manderley. The woman who he was married to before is known as Rebecca, and the new Mrs. De Winter kind of becomes obsessed in a way with Rebecca. All of her thoughts, all of her feelings now at Manderley are through the lens of, well, what would Rebecca have done? And how much better at this was Rebecca than I am. And that was really interesting to see. Like, I didn't expect this book to be so relevant to like modern culture. I feel like there could be like a really cool like Instagram type take on this book if we did like a modern update on it, because she is just convinced that Rebecca was this like perfect person, and a lot of people perceived Rebecca to be that way. And so I really like this book. This book packs some punch as far as relevance in modern day, and I too now have joined, like, choo-choo. I'm on the Rebecca train. Like, I get it. I recommend this book now, and I very much enjoyed it. So that's Rebecca. Next, I want to talk about MOXIE, which is a book that I got from the library, and I had to return, but that is okay. Someone else is reading MOXIE right now, and that makes my heart really happy. Like, is that not like the sign of a really good book when you're just so excited that someone else is reading it? I just imagine, like, 16-year-old girl had a hard day at school, comes home, reads MOXIE. Reading is so amazing. It's the best. MOXIE is another book with a lot of hype, YA hype, which is like a whole nother level of hype. And again, it meant it for me. Like, I get it now. I get why everyone likes this book. MOXIE is about a 16-year-old girl named Viv, and she goes to a small town Texas high school, and she is fed up with the atmosphere at the high school. I have a 60-second book review for this book that I will link above and below. Suffice it to say, it is unpleasant to imagine going to a high school like this one. At the same time, though, I could relate to a lot of the things that she was experiencing, either things that I experienced as a student or things that I noticed as I started off working as a substitute teacher like right after college. And so I spent some time in the classroom, and whew, it's rough. It's awesome, but it is also rough. And that's one of the things I really appreciated about this book. Like, even the most awful, like, situation in the book didn't feel contrived. Like, it absolutely felt like something that could happen in a high school. The entire time I was reading this book, I had that song from SNL in my head, the Welcome to Hell song. If you haven't heard that, I will link it down below. It puts a smile on my face and also makes me salty every time I listen to it. I really liked this book though, and I hope that it does get an adaptation. I think it was picked up by Amy Poehler's production company, and I just, oh, that would be so, it has so much potential, and it's just such a good story about, oh, let me rewind back to the story. So Viv is a 16-year-old girl in high school, fed up. She creates a zine called MOXIE, and she like secretly posts it around her school. As a result, other girls see it, and in the zine she says that like all of the girls should draw hearts and stars on their hand. And then she comes to school that day, and there are not a lot of girls, but there are some girls with hearts and stars on their hands. And so she gets this sense of like, okay, I'm not the only one here who's seeing this crap, and I'm going to, like, I need to pause for crap. That's not even a, anyway, I'm not the only one who sees the stuff that's happening, and maybe if I get enough girls to feel like they're not alone in their anger, we could do something. We could change this. I really enjoyed reading this. I think it has a lot of potential and power to show even in a high school. And oh, one of the things that really struck me about this book were the adults in the book. Like, I mean, I feel like as a grown-up reading YA, I notice the adults more now, and I just, oh my gosh, the adults in this book. But again, completely like, this is real life. This is exactly how this would go down. But that's one of the things this book does so well, is it shows all of the different layers of complication and control in all of these types of toxic environments. So for the girls at the high school who want to speak up, they have all kinds of other stuff that is being like held over their heads that really keeps them from feeling like they can speak out. Like, for example, they all want to go to good colleges. Like, they want to get out of the small town that they're in and make something of themselves. And they feel like if they speak out and they get suspended, that's going to jeopardize their chance of a scholarship or even being able to get into a good school. So yeah, loved MOXIE. Highly recommend if you're looking for a YA pick. That's a good one. But I also read another YA book this month. This was a very YA month. I also read Dumplin by Julie Murphy. I actually listened to this book completely. Like, I never had a physical copy. I only listened to it, which is very, very unusual for me. Usually, for me, I need to have a physical copy of an audiobook. Like, I can't just launch into an audiobook for fiction. I have to read about like the first 20 to 50 pages of the book, and then I can listen to the audiobook. I get lost in life very easily. I mean, like literally lost, but also figuratively. And so not being familiar with the characters and then launching into the audiobook is too much. Like, I will get lost. I will have no idea what is going on. I will confuse characters. And so I usually pick up the physical book. I didn't with Dumplin. And it was fine. Like, I was not lost at all. This is such a good story. It felt a lot like just like flipping on the TV is what it kind of reminded me of. Like, not that it was mindless, but it was just pure enjoyment. Dumplin is about a teenage girl named Willow Dean. I want to say she's a senior in high school, might be a junior, thereabouts. Her mom is a former beauty pageant queen, and she now runs like the big beauty pageant in town, and she nicknamed Willow Dean Dumplin because of her weight. So usually Willow would not feel like the pageant was something that she could participate in, but in an act of like just pure bravery and defiance and badassery, Willow Dean decides to do it this year. And there was so much to the story. Like, it kept me entertained the entire time I was listening to it. I never got bored. And the person who narrated the book did such a good job. Like, there are female and male voices, deeper male voices in the book, and she does all of the voices. This is another one that I seriously like, oh, if this became a movie. And it is. Like, it's in production and I cannot wait to see it. Jennifer Aniston is producing it, and she actually plays the mom. I love her, so I can't wait. This is gonna be really good. So the next two books are kind of like a step outside of my normal reading pattern, and that is because I listened to 2 self-help books this month. I don't know. I really liked them, but also, I don't know. I listened to You Are a Badass by Jen Sincero and 10% Happier by Dan Harris. You Are a Badass is like your typical self-help book in my opinion, but it was also kind of a hype book for me. I listened to it and it really it's a mood booster for sure. Most of the content of the book reminded me a lot of The Secret. I haven't actually read The Secret, but like the ideas behind The Secret, which is that whatever it is that you want is out there, you just have to pursue it. You have to want it bad enough, you have to want it, allow it into your, all of the things that like self-help people say. I really liked the author's voice, and she also does the narration for the audiobook. There's some language, it's pretty funny, and I enjoyed it. But what I enjoyed more was 10% Happier by Dan Harris. Dan Harris is a news anchor, and in 2004, he had a panic attack on air. Google Dan Harris panic attacks. Yeah. And it was simultaneously really relatable and also heartbreaking to watch someone else have that happen to them. So in the book 10% Happier, Dan Harris talks about kind of why he thinks that happened, like how he went from being someone who every day was able to get on air and do his job to being someone who had a panic attack on air, and all the other things that were going on in his life at that point. It was actually really interesting to read that You Are a Badass book and then read 10% Happier, because I am naturally pretty skeptical of self-help tactics. Like the entire time I was reading You Are a Badass and The Secret, and really anything that stems from that same point of view, the entire time I'm thinking, okay, there are people who want things, certainly, but there are environmental factors that are completely out of their control that prevent them from doing it. It isn't that they don't want it bad enough, they want it plenty bad enough. It simplifies like socioeconomics and psychology in this way that is just unbelievable. And in 10% Happier, Dan Harris kind of like sprays skepticism all over these common self-help ideas. From Eckhart Tolle to the Dalai Lama, he has some skepticism, and it's like it's what we're all thinking. If you're skeptical, it's what you're thinking when you're reading this stuff, and he embodies that in such a way that he explores the skepticism, but also openly admits to the things that he's bought into. He thinks that this is helpful. In the end, he discovers meditation, and he talks about how it makes you about 10% happier. The thing I loved most about this book was Dan Harris's voice, for sure. I really related to him. I liked his skepticism. I liked his take on everything. And it kind of made me wish that I had cable so that I could watch him on Nightline. But if you're skeptical, but you also are interested in self-help, 10% Happier is like the perfect book for you. So now we're gonna get into some of the more tepid reads of the month. And that was Impossible Saints and The Boston Girl. Impossible Saints is by Clarissa Harwood. It's a historical fiction novel, and it follows two characters, Paul and Lilia. It takes place in the early 1900s in England, and Lilia is a suffragist, and Paul is an Anglican priest. They are acquaintances from childhood, and they reconnect in London. And yeah, I struggled with this book a lot. I didn't particularly connect with either character, and it just didn't feel like it did anything particularly well. I like a lot of history in my historical fiction, and this book didn't have that. I didn't walk away with a bunch of knowledge about voting rights for women in the early 1900s and, you know, what the outlook of that was and like specific events that actually happened. I didn't walk away with any of that. And then the romance between Lilia and Paul, while something I rooted for towards the end of the book, like it took me a while to get on that train. The characters became more aggravating, like the more time that they spent together, which isn't not ideal in a romantic situation. So I didn't find that I was like rooting for that to happen. I just didn't think it did the romance part of the book very well either. And I gave it 3 stars. There wasn't anything about it that I was like, this is a terrible book, but it barely made 3 stars though. And the other book that I was so excited to read and just did not come through for me was The Boston Girl by ANITA DUMAURIER. And this is another book that just like, I like more history in my historical fiction, and I didn't see that happening in this book. It's historical fiction and it's about a woman named Addie, and she in her old age is looking back on her life and talking to her granddaughter about it. And so a lot of the book is conversational, as it would be if you were talking to your granddaughter. But because of that, it's not very reflective. To me, the value in reading a book where the narrator is like looking back on her life is that she's gonna be saying some sort of like big lesson learned, or I don't know, something, grandma. Give me something. Like I want a lesson that she learned. I want like some like little tidbits of like verse and knowledge. And I didn't see that in this book. I think part of it is just like turn of phrase. I wanted more like quotable moments, and there weren't hardly any. So the writing is fairly simple, and I didn't love it. 9 books this past month. That was awesome. And in a short month, I give a lot of credit to an app that I have been using called Bookout, which I will talk about more in another video, and also Hoopla, being able to jump from reading a book to listening to it and go back and forth. I did that with MOXIE, I did that with The Good Daughter, and I listened completely to Dumplin, You Are a Badass, and 10% Happier. So that helped. What books did you read in the month of February? Have you read any of the books that I read? Did you agree, disagree? Comment down below. Thank you so much for watching, and of course also for reading. Have a great day. Bye.